Hold on.
My bad, everyone.
See, it wasn't me. If I can figure out how this thing goes around my face. Oh, no, I still suck. Hey, I can hear. I can hear now. Okay, here we go. Here we go. All right, let me try to get back on track here. As absent-minded as I am. Um, so as I was saying, is how many of us hear from God and then don't want to be obedient? Is that okay? Cool. Um, the thing about being obedient to God is your obedience to God is not just for you. Your obedience to God could be somebody else's blessing, could be somebody else's walk in getting to know who Christ is by your obedience. It could be setting not just you up, but your generations after you up for success or for failure. Generational sins are a real thing, and those can get broken though. Those are not set in stone. What I want to show you as an example of this is with Abraham. Okay? When Abraham was, I think he was 90 years old, God came and said, hey, you're going to have a son, okay? And if you know the story of Abraham, he went with Sarah and he had the relations with the maid or the bondservant, the lady, and they had a kid, but that wasn't the kid that was promised by God. He was going to have his own son. And it got to the point where when the angel of the Lord came and spoke to him, where Sarah was even like, she laughed a little bit, like, is this really going to happen? Kind of as a smirk. And I remember, come on, don't shut off on me. I remember reading where Abraham actually confronts her and said, why did you laugh? Okay? So if we are totally sold out for God, okay, why do we question him? And this comes with lack of faith too, because it says in the Bible, it says, I believe, but help my unbelief. I have faith, but help me increase my faith. So we have these moments here where we're really obedient to God, where we're almost too obedient to a point where, see, God, you say move, and say, okay. God, you say jump, how high? Okay, cool. And then there's other times where we don't want to listen to God. When, if God's telling us in the Bible that everything that he does for us is for our good and for his good, everything, why do we resist so much? Why is there so much resistance? Normally it's because fleshly it doesn't add up to your agenda, or you don't want to surrender. Okay? When God puts a plan in order and gives you a direction, most of the time it's probably going to go against what you think and or believe, and probably going to go against what you want. Okay, I'm going to give you an example of this. With Abraham, he got his son Isaac, correct? He was totally sold out for God in every way, to the point where God told him, I want you to take your son up on the hill and I want you to kill him. Now, put yourself in this position. If God came to you and said, hey, you know what? Your son, your daughter, your beloved, whatever is the closest thing to you, I want you to go take it and I want you to sacrifice it. I want you to give it away. I don't know about you, but I probably wouldn't be that obedient if they said, hey, yeah, you know what? You got to go take Addie and take her up on the hill. And I'm probably going to pray for 6-8 months. I'm going to talk to about 30 people and get confirmation and make sure that this is exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. But we see that with God. God was faithful to Abraham and promised these things to him. And he continued to deliver on everything. So when God came up and told, hey, I want you to go take Isaac up on the hill and sacrifice him, he didn't wait 6 months. He didn't wait and talk to a bunch of people close to him. He went up there that very next morning. It says in the Bible, he awoken early in the morning to take his son up to the hill. He didn't think about it. He didn't wait on it. God told him to move and he went. God directed him and said, this is what I want you to do, and he did it. because he was sold out. He was obedient to the will of God in his life, to the point of where he was willing to sacrifice his own son. We have resistance when it comes to God telling us to move, especially if it doesn't add up to the agenda of the flesh. Because there's two currencies that we can live by. We can live by a fleshly currency, which is going to do good, feel good, sound good, taste good for ourselves, or we can go by a spiritual currency. And a spiritual currency probably most of the time is not going to feel good. It's not going to sound good. It's going to put you in awkward positions. And it's probably going to cause you a little bit of suffering. But God says in the Bible as well, 365 times, fear not. Is that even through our suffering, through the obedience of our suffering, is that God will be there. God will show up. He's going to work all things out for your good. If we are 100% sold out on the will of God and God's word to be true, then we have to believe, or we should believe, that whatever God is pushing or pulling us in a direction, that we know that it's going to work out for our favor. I talk about the rudder of the ship thing and the wind in their sails, okay? I say that our feelings are our wind in our sails, but God needs to be the rudder of our ship. Is that feelings, experiential things, knowledge, wisdom, all these things push us in a direction. If the wind's coming from the north, you're not going to go south because the wind's coming from the north. You got to go north, but are you going northwest? Are you going northeast? Are you veering to the left or right? That's where God needs to be the rudder of your ship, not just the wind in your sails. Because he's the wind in your sails too, because he gives you these experiential things and these knowledge and wisdom to push you along the way. But it also comes with us then taking our hands off the wheel and saying, all right, God, I'm going to be obedient to you in every way. I'm going to listen to your direction to the point where it may put me behind the eight ball fleshly. People may talk about me. People may disagree with me. I may get in some fights. I may have some separation from family members or loved ones. Is it worth it? Is it worth it for you? When, a little background on me, when I came through the program here, most of you know my plan was not to stick around 612. That was not my idea. My idea was to go on a cruise ship, and I was going to cook, and I was going to have a whole bunch of good times in sunny places other than cold Ohio. That was my plan, and that's churching it up a little bit. Okay. I prayed for 40 days. I waited 40 days on an answer, and I remember it very vividly. On the 40th day, I asked God to slap me across the face, pretty much, and that's exactly what he did. And from that moment there, I had a choice. Just as Abraham had a choice when God told him to go and sacrifice his son. Were you going to wait and try to push your agenda, or make sure you have all your ducks in a row first before you move the way God's telling you to? Or are you going to jump and take that leap of faith? When God told me to stay at 612, I was not a happy camper. I'm not going to lie. I was not part of my plan. But I remember sitting on that porch at the women's house there on the deck where you guys have out there, and hitting my knees and crying. And I made the decision then to be obedient to God, not knowing the first thing about anything I was doing. But I had enough faith and trust in God that he was going to give me everything that I needed to be successful and to get me where I needed to be, as long as I stayed in his will. As long as I was obedient to him and put my faith and reliance upon and in him, that didn't matter what type of problems I had faced, is that he was going to see me through. And that's been the case ever since. I did not go to school to do this. I have experiential knowledge. And I have a faith in God to direct me in everything that I do. And there's a lot of times where I'm obedient, and there's a whole bunch of times where I'm like, yeah, God, that doesn't sound like a good idea. And then God has to remind me again, through my disobedience, how much that he does love me and how much I just need to shush up and listen. Because he says, be still and know that I'm God. Sometimes I don't like being still. I want to be on the move. I want to do things. God kept me still for 40 days to give me an answer. Where are we not being obedient to the will of God in our life? Where are we not moving when God says to move? When you know clearly God is giving you a message that you should be doing this or not doing that, or taking this direction, or doing this or not doing it, whatever it may be, where's the resistance coming from? Because if we're sold out for God, we believe the words of the Bible says everything works out for our good. That doesn't mean it's always going to feel good. That doesn't mean it's always going to be easy. But in Romans 5, it talks about, I call it the suffering cycle. This is just a Molzaniism, okay? Suffering, endurance, character, hope. It talks about that in Romans 5. And that's a cycle that you're going to go through, is you're going to suffer. But your suffering is not for naught because it builds your endurance. Just as an Olympic runner goes out there and trains and they put their body through absolute chaos and torment, they do that to build their endurance so they can keep running the race longer, faster, stronger. That's what God's doing for us in our life with our suffering. He's building your endurance for the next battle that we can't see, that we don't know about. So why do we complain and moan through the suffering so much? Because God tells us to rejoice through our sufferings. He's building you up for something that's unforeseen. Your obedience into him is going to strengthen you. Not just in a fleshly way, but in a spiritual way. Because when things don't make sense, and it doesn't look like there's light at the end of the tunnel, God tells us clearly, if we're sold out on him, if we're convinced that everything works out for his good, or for our good through him, then why do we resist it so much? And this is something we do every day. It could be as simple as not wanting to get into your guided journaling, or not wanting to go out and do something with the family. Or I'd rather sit and watch the TV instead of getting involved with a conversation or a Bible study. Because fleshly, I want to sit my butt on the couch and watch the boob tube. Boob tube. It's an old 1920s term, whatever. Boob tube. I can't think of it. Fellatician, whatever. TV. Same thing. But because it appeases our flesh, we're easily to do that. Someone says, oh no, come and sit down on the couch with me, eat some popcorn. Oh, cool. No problem. Hey, why don't you come and run a Bible study with me? Or why don't we come and go to fill in the blank, whatever it is, to do kingdom work? Well, yeah, it's Friday. I worked all week. Avengers are on, you know. But it appeases our flesh. Going back to what I was talking to the guys about the other day was with Ananias and Paul, and another area where you see God giving direction and someone being obedient because it turns out to be a blessing not for them, but for everybody else. Because see, your obedience to God, like I said at the very beginning, your obedience to God may not be a blessing for you at all. But you don't know how that blessing or that obedience is going to affect somebody else down the line. It may be their relationship with God that's formed. It may be their peace that they have. It may be their problem that has been solved. When Ananias was told by God that he was supposed to invite Paul into his house, you understand, Paul at this time, his name was Saul, he was conversion into Paul. He was commissioned to go kill Christians. That was his job. By the high priest said, you go out and kill the followers of God. And then God comes and tells Ananias, yeah, you know this guy Saul that's probably killed some of your family? I want you to bring him into your house. Is this better? Okay. I forgot what I was saying now, dang it. But okay, here we go. Back to Ananias. What if Ananias didn't do what he was directed to by God? What if he wasn't obedient? Because that was the catalyst there where Paul's change happened, where he ended up writing most of the New Testament. Through Abraham's obedience and faith in God, Abraham had seen God move so many times, so he didn't question him. He was sold out. To the point where God promised him to be a man of many nations, right? We see with Moses, as there was many things with Moses, but the thing that ended up keeping him out of the promised land was him striking the rock and getting water from it instead of speaking to the rock and making water come from it. There was many other things, but that was the straw that broke the camel's back that kept him out of the promised land. Doesn't say he didn't make it to heaven, but he didn't get to the whole promised land. We see that disobedience to God comes with consequences. Some of them are mighty consequences. Some of them are little. But just as your obedience can be a blessing, your disobedience can cause chaos. When we're sold out to the power of Christ in our life, there is nothing that God cannot do, because he uses you as a vessel then. 6 years ago, you would have never, ever, ever put the amount of money in my pocket that said I was going to stand up in front of a bunch of people and talk about God. Wouldn't happen. Nope. You said I was going to go cook in a kitchen, cool. But to give a message about God, no. The things that you think you cannot do are obtainable to do when you sell out to Christ. I promise you. If you haven't seen it yet in your life, wait. I promise you it will happen. When we're fully sold out for God, it will increase our faith. Think about Abraham there. He was told to go kill his son, didn't question it, gets up early in the morning, goes up to the rock or the altar, getting ready to come and strike his son and kill him, and the angel of the Lord stops him. He was willing to kill his son for the sake of Christ, to be obedient, knowing that all things will work out for his good. You ever had something you thought was going to be a really, really terrible situation, but ended up not being that bad? But you had to walk through it. You had to go and face it. You had to put the action in to go and walk forward, move towards it, make the situation to have an outcome, whether good or bad. Just as God calls us to action. He talks about it in Proverbs. He said, you plant a field in the springtime, you're going to reap a harvest in the fall. But you got to put the work in. Same thing that happens with our faith is that we put the work in till we start seeing God show up. And you say, man, how did I come through that storm of doo-doo, come out smelling like roses? How did that happen? It's because of God. There's no other way. Get into a bad situation, you think you don't know how, I don't want to face it, but you do. And it ends up being not that bad. For most of us, it's probably coming to 612. You get like anxiety. I know when I got here, I was anxious. I was scared. I came from the big city, and I came down here. First thing I did was we rolled over a pile of doo-doo in the road. Okay, I'm like, what the heck? Where am I at? And now this is home. I had to walk through it. This wasn't ideal for me, but now this is home. I wouldn't trade it for the world. But you had to walk through that. What I think is crazy is most of us come to a place of desperation or of agony, and we're willing to do whatever it takes to get freedom, to get help. And then we start getting a little taste of it, a little bit of freedom, a little bit of help, and then we want to take our will back. All of a sudden, we know something. We know that our plan is better than God's plan. I don't know about you, but how'd that work out for anybody? My plan sucks. Royally. So I just want to challenge you guys tonight. Abraham was fully convinced in the power of God and the direction of God. And through his obedience, he received blessings. And not just for him, that carry down to us right now. He said we'd be a man of many nations. Ananias was obedient, and now we still get to read the words from Paul in the New Testament. And this goes on to other characters in the Bible too. You can get through David to Samson, everybody. But there's a level of obedience there. And through that level of obedience came blessings. Samson's one of my dudes in the Bible. I love Samson. He was a bad you-know-what. But God still used him, and he was, even through his transgressions, through his women issues, God still used him to free his people. To the point where Samson ended up collapsing. I don't know if you know the story. Collapsing his building down on top of him to save the people. Save his people. God still used that situation for good. So my challenge is to all of us. When God tells you to move, don't hesitate. When he tells you to jump, jump. When he tells you to sit, sit. For most of us, so I would say most of, there's some of us, like Jimmy, Daniel, Ernie, Bob, Steve, whatever we're going to call him today. He has a problem being still. Wants to be busy, which is cool. But God clearly tells us in the Bible, be still and know that I am God. Sometimes God just wants you to sit you on your butt and seek him out. And through that, you will receive a blessing too. But don't get me wrong, that's not giving you a sign off to be lazy. Well, God told me to sit here, so I'm not going to move. No, that don't work. You got to still put action in, okay? You can't say, well, God told me I'm going to be financially stable and I'm going to be wealthy, and you know what? I'm going to sit here on the couch and I'm going to eat chips till it happens. Here we go. Well, that don't work that way, okay? God calls you to action. But when we put in the work, God shows up. Abraham put in the work by his obedience, and God showed up. Sometimes it was at the last second, as he's bringing down the knife or the axe, whatever it is, to sacrifice his son. Angel of the Lord came then. He didn't wait as he was on the way up the hill or as he was laying him down. He waited till he was ready to strike, and God showed up. Sometimes God's going to make you wait. And when he does, it's for your benefit. It's to increase your faith. It's to strengthen you. It also says in the Bible, never have I seen the righteous forsaken. That's a promise. That's not just words. It says never. It doesn't say sometimes or maybe or if I'm having a bad day. No, it says never have I seen the righteous forsaken. So if we are living our life right for Jesus, and not saying we're always going to get it right, okay? But if we are trying earnestly the best we can to live for Jesus, he said we will not be forsaken. That means he's not going to leave you. He's not going to leave you hanging. There's not going to be something that works out for your good at the end of it. It will not. A lot of times it doesn't feel that way. But I promise you, God will show up. When God tells you to move, move. When he tells you to sit, sit. But don't stop putting in the work. You got to put in the work. God calls us to action constantly. And sometimes the action is sitting. Sometimes the action is going out volunteering or doing your guided journaling or get involved with group or talking about things that you don't want to talk about. Whatever it is. God's going to direct you. But too many times we ignore the voice of God or the direction of God, because it says it's a still small voice, right? God talks about in the Bible about the banging cymbal, the clanging drum, all this noise that we have in our life. We want to listen to the music. We want to be busy with work. We want to be involved in the relationship. Whatever it is, all these outside things that interfere. When are we going to silence them all so we can hear the still small voice of God? When's the last time that we took time just to listen? Especially for me, because I like to talk. Okay? So, me sitting down and just trying to listen to God sometimes is extremely difficult. But through that comes an increase of faith and obedience. It was reflected in even today where I did not want to sit and pray about what I should talk about or this. I did not want to do that. It was Saturday, day to relax. Yeah, no. It was diving in, praying, and then being still and waiting for God to give me a direction. And he did. But my action step was sitting and being quiet at that moment. Sometimes your action step is not that pleasant. Sometimes your action step is going to pick up trash or having to clean the barn. Whatever it is put before you. Because if we're doing it for God and we're doing it like we're doing it for God, then it doesn't become a chore. It's like, yeah, I got to go do it. Okay. We're doing it for Jesus. Do it for God. How many of you guys absolutely love your mothers? I'm a mama's boy. I do, or fathers. If my mom called me and asked me to do just about anything, I probably would go do it. Because I love my mom. She asked of me, I'm going to go do it. without a question, as long as it's not sinful. She asked me to set a car on fire or something like that, I'm probably not going to do that. But we should be able to get to that same place for God. We should love him enough to say, you're asking of me, I will do. Because even people with the best of intentions may let you down. Even with the right heart is behind it. God's never going to let you down. It may not feel good, but he works all things out for your good. That's all I got, guys, ladies. Sorry. What we're going to do here is we're going to sing one more song. We're going to do the offering here as the song's going on, and then we will close in prayer, and we will be dismissed. Cool?